Welcome to the show. IB Nation Sports Talk is off and rolling on this Tuesday. Hope you're having a good one wherever you are today. Sean Steyer's with you on the show. I noticed the big show is done, so we didn't have any delays getting into this one. We've got a little smorgasbord for you on today's show. We're going to start off with Dan Rubin. Going to talk a little Boston College football. To answer your question up front, yes, did have to pre-record it, which typically happens with most of our guests because they have day jobs. so we do what we can. We squeeze them in around their schedules. We continue to talk to some insiders who cover teams that Notre Dame will be playing in the upcoming 2025 football season. And we talked to Dan. I talked to Dan, I should say, about plenty of Boston College football, including Bill O'Brien. Al Washington was a candidate for the job that Bill O'Brien ended up getting a little bit more than a year ago. I guess it's been about a year and a half ago at this point. We talked about quarterbacks and who might be the quarterback this upcoming season, and plenty of other topics. After the Dan Rubin interview, the one and only Dean of Discipline, Vince D'Addario, is going to be with me. And we've got plenty we're going to talk about there. Some big news for Notre Dame men's and women's basketball today with Pat Garrity, Notre Dame alum, being named the general manager of both the Notre Dame men's and women's basketball programs. Vince and I will talk about that in rapid fire. We've got some Notre Dame-USC stuff to get into. And the recurring question that always comes up, will blank force Notre Dame to join a conference? I saw some of that this week as well. So we'll tell you exactly what blank is when we get into rapid fire. So Vince, after Dan Rubin, and let's just get into it right now. Little Boston College football. Well, Boston College is back on the schedule once again this year. I think we only had, maybe a gap of 1 year in between BC appearances on Notre Dame's schedule, and Dan Rubin is with us. He covers the Eagles. Dan, thanks again for doing this today.
Hey, thanks for having me. Anytime I get to talk about the Holy War, I'm all in, though I will say I think we both got beat by Villanova by the whole Pope being the first American Pope, neither coming from Notre Dame or Boston College. But at least we'll have a Pope who understands the significance of this football game.
That's right. That's exactly right. Who knows? Maybe he'll show up for all we know. I guess we'll find out. But let's go back a little bit, because I think, again, it hasn't been that long since Notre Dame and BC played, but at the same time, some significant things have happened within the last, year and a half or so. Namely, they hired Bill O'Brien last offseason. He's obviously going into his second year now after Jeff Hafley left to go to the Green Bay Packers. How big a deal was it that BC hired a coach with the background and experience that Bill O'Brien has?
Oh, it was huge. It was huge. It all kind of fell into place at the right time for the program to get what they wanted in a coaching hire. So the common misconception between how they wound up on Bill O'Brien was that Jeff Hafley was on his way out and took the opportunity to people like to say, quote, fire himself, because he went to the Green Bay Packers, and that hadn't been the case. He had really started to turn the team up in a way that last year when they won the Fenway Bowl under him, that he had started to turn a corner with them that he really liked. I remember saying before the Fenway Bowl, because Fenway Park being one of my cathedrals, I was like, is there a place that you ever feel that way about football? And he goes, if you've never been to a Monday night at Lambeau Field, he goes, that's something special. And then a couple months later, he's the defensive coordinator of the Green Bay Packers. So I was like, well, that worked out. Like, I guess he knew in his heart of hearts that was coming. But he never wanted to leave Boston College. He never wanted to leave college football. There were some things about college football that I think had made him unhappy in terms of being a coach. And those are things that Bill O'Brien truly embraced, the NIL landscape, the transfer portal, understanding how it had kind of converted and wasn't the same as it was a few years ago. The one thing about getting Bill O'Brien was that it came along at the right time. Jeff Hafley leaves. he had taken the offensive coordinator position at Ohio State, but the New England Patriots having kind of moved in their own different direction that freed him up to go to Ohio State. He never really wanted to leave the area. He's a local guy, family roots. His wife went to Boston College. He was a Boston College fan growing up, a guy with so many New England roots and having played at Brown, understanding everything there is to know about this region. His family's still up here. He didn't want to really uproot his kids. He had a son that played baseball at Tufts University in Medford, Mass. So it opened up an opportunity, and Ryan Day, being a former Boston College offensive coordinator in his own right, who loves the school, said, by all means, commute back and forth, do what you got to do. Freed him up, landed it, boom. That first year, he comes in on a really weird schedule, but it was one of those that was like, oh wow, okay, yeah. I gave the comparison. He shook Sinatra's hand. He coached Tom Brady. You get a guy of that caliber, you're picking him up, and he really wanted to be the Boston College head coach, which I think was a big deal for BC.
Well, and of course there was a connection to Notre Dame in that coaching search, and Al Washington, the defensive line coach here at Notre Dame, who is a BC alum himself. And from what we had kind of heard, it sounded like Washington made it at least a pretty tough decision for a guy who's a position coach versus a guy with all the experience that O'Brien has. Was that just too much for BC ultimately in that decision to turn down just all the experience and maybe even the high profile of a guy like O'Brien?
I think so. I think it was internally. There were people, you get torn, right? Because Al's such a beloved member of the Boston College community, and had coached at BC, was a legend when he played here right before BC went to the ACC. I think there's probably someone who played, I can't remember who it was, the game that Matthias Kiwanuka, I think Al Washington might have been thrown out of that Virginia game too, back in 2005, when the wrong tight end took a dive at Kiwanuka's knees and Al went ballistic. So it was a well-earned 15-yard penalty for BC. But Al is so beloved at BC and truly wanted to come back. Has always been a name that's cycled around. But when you look at the experience factor of what Bill O'Brien kind of brought, there was a bit extra that in a coach like Bill O'Brien that I think that maybe sold him over Al. The one thing about Al Washington is that if you're bringing him in, you're bringing a guy who understands Boston College better than probably many of the coaches that are in the country right now, and who can sell Boston College understanding what it is. Or did you want a coach who had the built-in coaching resume that also understood BC and understood the university, maybe not the football program, but in the way that college football has gone, is able to change kind of the dynamics of it. So publicly, it feels like Bill O'Brien was the choice to adapt Boston College as opposed to bringing in someone who knows Boston College and then can adapt as a coach.
So O'Brien's first year last year, I mean, they started off with a splash. They beat Florida State, and looks like things are going great. It was a little, up and down, I guess. They ultimately finished 7-6. Was it? I mean, do you consider it? Was it a successful season? Was year one a successful season for O'Brien? How do most people regard it?
I think so. I think there's an excitement factor around BC. The fact that going into that game at Missouri, they were ranked, which was the first time that had happened in 5 or 6, in probably close to 8 years. I think it was 2018 the last time it burst into an actual ranking. The September 14th game, losing that game to Missouri, the fact that it was a one possession game, it felt like BC was in the right path. And then things kind of fell apart. The Western Kentucky game felt like a game that BC should have won more handily at home than a 21-20 win. And then you go in and you lose 3 games in a row. So people were excited based off the start of the year and kept that excitement going because the team started to shift as the year went on. You make a change at quarterback where Thomas Castellanos was actually taken out of the starting spot, and Grayson James was made the starting quarterback partway through the year. That changeover, making that switch, dealing with all of those bumps and hurdles, make a difference in terms of the wins and losses, where you start to overlook them a bit and see kind of what Bill O'Brien was trying to do after the team started so hot. So I think there's a lot of excitement. At the same time, they still only finished with 7 wins, which has been kind of the ceiling for the last 10 years. So there's a part of it that I do think there are people who are expecting BC to make the jump, but this is also the same conversation that we had back in 2021, back in 2022-ish, when we're saying, okay, they were able to win 7 games in the first year of a head coach. How do they get to that jump, and how do they make that jump? So everybody's very excited. Everybody thinks that there is greater things to come. As someone who has covered the team, I have no problem saying I've heard that before. And now it's a matter of how they get to that next level, and can he finally be the guy to do that?
Well, so I mean, you have been there for a long time, as you said, and as someone who's seen a lot of BC football, like, does I guess, one, what would you say is the identity of the team that Bill O'Brien has, and two, does it feel like it's, a starting point to something ultimately bigger over these next few years?
I think the identity of Boston College has not changed much over the last forever. They've always been a tough football team that needs to run the football, play with good offensive line, play with a tough, rugged defense that's not afraid to punch you in the mouth. I think that's always been the identity of a Boston College team. I think that the difference between Bill O'Brien and Jeff Hafley in particular is that Jeff Hafley wanted to get the team a little more free-flowing, a little more creative-minded, go backyard, schoolyard football if they had to, and do things on the fly. And some of that stuff maybe felt a bit outside of Boston College's character of an adaptation to the new age. That's gone with Coach O'Brien. You're going to run how he wants you to play the game. And some of that does have some different creativity factors to it, whether it's a formation, whether it's a type of play, whether it's the complexity of a route versus the option. But when everything's scripted in a way, like even your creativity is scripted, which is not, okay, where was that play in the playbook? Maybe we should put that one in. That's not happening under Coach O'Brien. So whether or not that's the key to success is going to be determinant on how they develop the talent that they have in the second year, this talent that's still here. And then how do you recruit guys to then play that style? Because obviously that's such a contrast, particularly offensively, from where BC even started last year, with a lot of the same staff with a lot of the same players, I should say, the long right personnel that Coach Hafley had.
You mentioned NIL earlier when you were talking about Jeff Hafley. To what degree is Boston College, invested, I guess, in the NIL aspect of this whole thing right now?
It's competitive. It's understood that in the Northeast, you're also the only power conference team. You're the only power football team aside from Syracuse between here and really Pennsylvania, unless you count Rutgers, which deals with its own stuff in the Big Ten. And I have no problem saying we had no problem dealing with that in the Big East. So, those are it's kind of your recruiting fertile recruiting grounds. That's where you were recruiting against Rutgers anyway. So you're still recruiting against Rutgers in that regard, and have played Rutgers on kind of the playing field there. But there are no power programs up here. So you're trying to convince people to come to the Northeast, which some people do. Some people love it up here. A lot of people love it up here. I mean, it's really only lousy for about 2 months out of the year in the wintertime when it gets bitter cold. Particularly if you're a football player, I can't think of a better time to play in the Northeast when the foliage is kicking in. So you're also trying to then recruit against that with your NIL resources, which for BC, maybe your resources, look, BC's never going to be the place that goes out and creates a payroll on par with the University of Miami or what you hear from some of these other schools that are out there that that are publicly talking about how much they can offer players. Mm-hmm. BC, Bill O'Brien was the first one who said it. We're not looking for guys like that at BC. We're looking for BC players and then who are good football players, the right fit for the program. So you're not looking to outspend. You're looking to use it as an augmentation to your recruiting scheme, which has always been in its own lane anyway. It's a strong academic school. tough football program. You can win at Boston College. You just have to do it the BC way, and trying to compete against some of these other schools on their own grounds, on what they're doing. You're not going to win that battle. So you were never going to win that battle. You weren't going to do it in the non-NIL. That wasn't what BC did in the non-NIL era. So you're playing with the same background as everybody else, different standards, different types of standards that aren't better or worse. And that's how you become successful, is to do it, the BC way. And that's what Bill O'Brien is 100% committed.
So if I'm hearing that, I mean, it sounds like the bulk of the, like his recruiting, like high school recruiting versus transfer portal, it sounds like maybe somewhat similarly to Notre Dame. It's going to be predominantly you're going after high school kids and then augment with specific needs from the transfer portal.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can see even in this year's class of the guys that came in, that, or what you see in the rankings, without knowing, too much about how they're targeting or who they're targeting, you're able to get guys who are coming in, who are transferring in to play certain things. You're getting a Dylan Lonergan who can come in and compete for the quarterback's position, who's a Bill O'Brien guy from Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
You're dipping into the portal for guys like that, guys from Michigan that maybe are looking not necessarily for a second chance, but are looking for a different chance. I don't like I've never liked with the transfer portal looking at a guy and saying, well, he didn't work out here, he's looking for a second chance. Some of those guys are second chance type guys, but the majority are just looking for something different. And so if you're offering them something different and that happens to be what they're looking for, then that's what they're coming here. And that's the same pitch that you're using on the recruiting trail anyway, when you're going and saying, look, you want to come to Boston College, it's going to be very different than it is at Cal. It's going to be very different than it is at Louisville. It's going to be different than Wake Forest and within the ACC. And those are the guys that you've always been trying to get anyway. So it is right. You're going to develop your team from the ground up, and then you're going to figure out what you need on an annual basis, go into the portal and say, if we need a guy or we think this guy can help us, let's try to get him in.
So you led me right into what I was going to ask you about next, and that's the quarterback. You talked about bringing Lonergan in from Alabama, where I believe O'Brien recruited him down there at Alabama. They benched Tommy Castellanos last year for Grayson James. So is it basically James and Lonergan for the job? Is this like, where does it stand after spring? And I guess, heading into the summer and toward fall training camp ultimately.
Obviously, most popular guy on the roster is the quarterback that we aren't talking enough about. Last year, going into last year, Thomas Castellanos was the man. He was absolute, like, he had won a bowl game. There was the image of him after the Fenway Bowl with the silver baseball bat and the cigar hanging out of his mouth when he was on the field with it. Like, he could do no wrong in the Boston College football program. You fast forward less than a year, and now all of a sudden he's not starting. And truthfully, if you even look at his numbers over the first 3 quarters of the season, they weren't necessarily that bad. I mean, they had 18 touchdowns. He had 5 picks. He was completing 60% of his passes. He was just had some performances that you looked at and you were like, all right, he's trying to learn a new offense. The offense maybe doesn't suit him perfectly for what Bill O'Brien wanted to do. Castellanos was a free-flowing quarterback. You put the ball in his hands and he could run around in the backfield and run it, and that's not a Bill O'Brien offense. He wants you in a 3-step drop to deliver and survey the field. So he was putting up decent numbers, but something just felt like it wasn't clicking. And so they make the change to Grayson James, who had played a couple of times already that year. I think he'd had to play 1 game when Tommy was out. And Grayson James plays well. And it's well enough that I have no problem saying going into the offseason, he's your best quarterback coming back. Like, he is. So he's your number 1 guy. He's played in the system. He goes into spring ball as the guy who started at the end of the year. You never want to have one quarterback. That's one thing that I think everybody can admit, especially in the ACC, especially at Boston College, who hasn't had a full-time starter, it feels like, in like a guy last an entire season in years. I think you have to go back to like almost 10 years to find a quarterback that actually started and finished every single game in the season. Like even Phil Jakovic never made it through a full season without missing a game here or there. So you find a guy like Lonergan who understands what Bill O'Brien wanted in a quarterback because he's already heard that. He makes a ton of sense to come in and potentially push James, share some ideas, share some vision, and maybe earn some snaps, maybe even become the starter. We don't know. As it stands right now, you never know how a guy's going to do once the bodies start flying. They also brought in Shaker Rising, who's a recruited freshman, another quarterback who can play this style, but he's a freshman, so you're probably not going to see him in the BC lineup. But at the same time, if he's good enough, why wouldn't you make him the guy? Now, all of that is kind of to say, well, James is still your number one starter, at least unless something happens in the fall and through summer training that you look at and be like, okay, he was pushed, and now we think we have a higher ceiling over the time with Lonergan. But I always like the idea that any of your quarterbacks are supposed to be able to step in and perform well in the offense. That's what we saw last season. That's what happened the year before when they finally made the decision to go to Castellanos. The year before that, when Dracovic went down and Emmett Moorhead played well, with the exception of one very snowy game in South Bend that we prefer to never speak about ever again in these parts.
I'm sure.
And before that, Dracovic, Dennis Grosel, all those quarterbacks, they're good enough to play, but you always want to have more than one to say, let's make him, if we have to make him the starter, if we want to make him the starter, he's got to be the guy.
I mean, I think Notre Dame fans would like, if you could build the perfect snow globe, put it on your desk, that would probably be it. Notre Dame, BC, snow everywhere, second half. That was,
Oh man, I just remember. So Emmett Moorhead, who was playing quarterback that game, was a California kid who like perfect. I'm so jealous. He had perfect hair, like the California all American kid look. And the camera cut to him on the sidelines as the snow is like sticking to his hair, and I'm like, okay. Outside of the fact that I think it was 40-0, I was like, this is perfect conditions. Like, this is my kind of weather. And they showed him with like his eyes shut. It was the worst possible. I just looked at him like, that is a poor kid who is in the most miserable situation that he could possibly figure out weather-wise. No doubt. And they're getting stomped right now. Like, they're getting beaten up pretty good. That poor kid, I was just like, he wants to be anywhere but right there right now.
Yeah, no kidding. Oh, my gosh. Well, they I believe they lost a couple offensive linemen to the NFL after quarterback. Is that maybe their biggest question mark or something else?
I honestly think the question marks might be a little bit other, something maybe besides where the offensive line is. The offensive line, you're always going to be in decent shape at BC. That's maybe there's a couple of nicks here and there that you have to overcome, that you have to work on your offensive line and say, all right, are these guys going to be the guys that when they work together and fumble through the offensive line those first couple of starts? I do think when it comes to the line itself, it'll be fine. I do worry sometimes about how the roster kind of molds around that, how a quarterback plays in there. Who's going to be the primary pass catcher? I know that there's always a couple of names that are coming back. A guy like Lewis Bond, who's a number one receiver, but who else is going to catch your passes? Who is going to be how they gel with a quarterback, how they gel with a system? So offensively, I honestly think sometimes the biggest thing that's maybe facing BC is where they're going to get a running back who can pound the rock between the tackles. Right now, there aren't too many guys that ring a bell with experience to maybe do that. Jordan McDonald is in from Central Florida. Von Pemberton was a transfer from Ball State as a 230-pound running back, but maybe isn't the type of guy. I think he might actually be a fullback now that I think about it. But the guy who really surprised last year, Turbo Richard, is small. He's 5'8", 200 pounds. He can come out of the backfield. He can catch passes. He can block. But once you get between the guards and once you need to find a running back who can pound between the guards like Kai Robichaux did, that is, I think, the biggest question facing BC right now is who's going to gain you 4 yards on first down when you want to train them, bleed the clock. Who's going to be the guy that bleeds the clock for you? Your workhorse back to get 200-something carries. They've always had one. I'm just not sure who it is right now.
I've read some pretty good things about their secondary. They feeling pretty good on that side of the ball?
Yes. Defensive coordinator Tim Lewis is a genius. He's one of the great guys in football. Really just a great human, a really good football coach, and a guy who designed defenses, for the Pittsburgh Steelers, the New York Giants. He's been at every level. He was a head coach, I think, the AAF at one point, like that old startup league back before COVID.
Right.
He's worked in the XFL, the UFL. I mean, he's so good at what he does. And they have a lot of staff around him that can work on things. You get guys like KP Price. I mean, he's a lockdown defender waiting to happen. Amari Jackson is very good. There are just guys on this roster that are talented, that can play big, that know how to do it. Ashton McShane is a sophomore who had a good first year. Is a little bit surprising at times. Max Tucker is a safety. He's a local kid, loves to hit. There's a lot of guys that I think in this defensive backfield that are going to, and that's a good thing in 2025 for college football. You want to play against pass-happy offenses, you got to start in the back and work your way up. You do need penetration. You do need to carry the second level. But those deep guys need to be locked down, and that's something I think BC is going to bring a lot to the table with.
I saw they've got UConn on the schedule this year. I don't think they schedule UConn all the time. Like, is this maybe – like, could that be a little maybe budding Northeastern rivalry kind of situation?
Well, I'll be careful what I say before I wind up on a bulletin board in stores. So there is an actual, so the rivalry between BC and UConn, it's kind of a three-headed monster up here. You get BC, UConn, and UMass. I know UMass went to the Mid-American Conference, but BC, they play UMass. UMass tried to make inroads, didn't work. UMass got a whole bunch of things they got to figure out. BC lost to UConn under Jeff Hafley, and going into the game the next year when they played Connecticut at home, they lost down there. It was the first time UConn had ever beaten BC, and it stung. Like, it stung harsh because back in the day when BC was in the ACC, UConn was one of the teams when they were leaving, when BC was leaving, that filed the infamous Big East lawsuit. They were the ones suing. They sued everybody under the sun. I think they sued BC. They were the leading team. When UConn wanted to get into the ACC way back when, and the ACC was looking, BC, I believe, was one of the factors that said, we want to be the only ACC team in the Northeast, which, again, made total sense. It wasn't that they were advocating to, against UConn. They were advocating more for themselves to say, we want to be like Texas A&M didn't want Texas in the SEC because they wanted to be the only Texas team in the SEC. Yeah. So UConn gets kept out, and UConn has not been happy about that. Their supporters, they supporters are not happy about that. So years later, decades later now, the UConn supporters, boy, do they not like Boston College. And I think the feeling might be mutual. Man. So it's anytime they get together, it's one of those that it's like, all right, BC should win that game. And honestly, if you're going to beat an independent, if you're going to play an independent and you're going to play a Big East team that's an independent football team, and you're in the ACC, you should win that game. You should expect to win that game if you want to be a 9 or 10 win team. That's what I always say. You shouldn't be walking into that game saying, if we want to compete with Clemson and we want to compete with the Alabamas and we want to compete with Notre Dame and we want to compete with teams up at that level, we can't be looking at our non-conference games against teams that are technically group of five or along the AAC lines or MAC lines or anything like that, and be looking at that and saying, we shouldn't win that game, or how do we, like, that they're going to bring the heat, but you also just need to say we should be, it should be allowable for fans to accept that game should be a win. So careful what I say on that, because I don't want to wind up on some dartboards in Hartford. Probably already am. But yeah, I mean, hey, I'll take it. I love playing local teams. I love the local flavor, and anytime I have friends down in Connecticut. Anytime I can make them drive 80 miles northeast to watch a game with me, I will.
Makes it a little spicy, that's for sure.
Yep.
And Notre Dame and Boston College, November 1st. Could be snowing again here in South Bend. Who knows by the time November rolls around. So
could be snowing in Massachusetts that week. Could
that's
be
very true.
Could be 75. It could also be 75 and sunny for all we know. Massachusetts weather. You could be getting on the same day.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of what it's been like around here this spring so far. It's like we just had our air on because it was in the 80s, and now it's feeling almost like we need to kick the heat back on again today. So.
Yeah. 40 degrees in Massachusetts this morning when we woke up. It was 80 over the weekend, and I was outside like doing yard work. I don't know. Maybe it's gonna rain, so I live in Seattle now.
We've got the rain here. It'll probably be there by tomorrow for you. So. Dan Rubin, bceagles.com. Always appreciate you. Long time. We had you on several times, it feels like now, over the years. And I'll always appreciate your time when you're able to jump on and share a little BC wisdom with us. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
And away he goes, and there he is. It's Vince D'Addario. I even unmuted myself for this one, Vince.
And now I have. So there we go. Because you never know, like, if you're backstage, but you're not mute. Like, yeah, I just don't know what gets out there. And frankly, I don't want to take that chance.
No. Good call.
I had enough brushes with, internet success that I'm going to try my best not to have that happen again.
Good call.
Oh, that's not going to work.
Beefeater says he loves Dan's accent. I do love that thick Boston accent that he's got on him. There's no mistaking where Dan is from.
That is correct. There's no mistaking at all where Dan is from. And at first I was like, man, I was really hoping he'd have more of a Boston accent, but he really started to kind of get into it there.
Got a little
after a while.
There. That's right.
Yeah, when he was talking about Yukon and all, like, okay, all right. We're there.
When we finished up, we were talking a little Dunkin' Donuts. I was, telling me how far he lives, from campus and, how long the drive is and all that kind of stuff. And I went, there's probably about 30 Dunkins on your way then, right? And he's like, yeah. And he said it's hilarious because I guess in the fall, by the time, like the season rolls around, those Dunkings outfits that Ben Affleck and those guys have. They actually sell those outfits. And he says,
nice.
He said that, around Halloween, people will have those Dunkings outfits and they'll show up to BC games for Halloween wearing those.
It's pretty great, frankly. So, I was thinking about getting you one for your birthday. So,
well,
you'd wear it.
You give me that jacket. I'd have it right here. I'd have it on here. I would. Tommy asked while that pre-recorded interview was going on, he said, how come when the pre-recorded interviews are at the end of the show, you never come back and say bye? Well, this is Irish Breakdown, and I'm a big Irish goodbye guy.
Yeah.
So yeah, there is no goodbye. Just we do an Irish goodbye, and that's it. So show's over. Right. Show's over. Don't need to talk no more.
Time to go.
How you like them apples? All right. It's that time, Vince. There's no wasting time on a show like this.
I know.
Are you ready for rapid fire?
Let's do this, man. It's weird because I'm always, and you know this, I'm always like skating in at the last second, 5:00, the whole deal. But then on a day like today, I'm upstairs pacing around, like, we got to get this going. I got my laptop out. I'm listening to the interview, I spared you from like my laptop walking around the upstairs. So I turned my camera off but I'm listening. I'm like, and I'm just pacing. I'm like, okay, when are we going to start this thing? When are we going to start this thing?
No.
And normally it's just like, I got to get in there,
It's like
I'm ready.
It's like a reliever just itching to get out of the
bullpen.
Get in the game. Come on.
I've been warming up for the past 34 minutes. I'm ready.
All right. We got a lot to get to in this rapid fire. Big news for Notre Dame basketball today. Notice I didn't say men's or women's because it's both in this case. Former Notre Dame men's basketball standout Pat Garrity has been hired to be the general manager for both the Notre Dame men's and women's basketball team. According to the university's release today, Garrity will be tasked with developing long-term roster management strategies for both programs. He'll work to establish a clear vision in recruiting in the transfer portal while working hand in hand with the NIL office on a financial asset allocation strategy. So, Vince, what do you think about this big, bold move for Notre Dame men's and women's basketball?
I dig it. I think that both teams probably needed one. And if you're just going to do one over both, I think that works. I mean, they share a practice facility. They have, I think, very like-minded coaches. I think that the coaches get along. I think this works. I think this is the first time I've heard of one person being over the men's and the women's programs.
First one in the country. Notre
Okay.
Dame is the first school in the country to have a general manager overseeing both.
I think it's a great idea. I don't know that I would have come up with Pat Garrity to be that name, but because I don't know what he's been up to since he retired. Like, I have no idea what his history has been because I did not get the press release. So I don't know what his
Sucker.
I know, seriously. I don't think I'm on the basketball list. I'm on baseball and football, but I'm not on basketball for whatever reason. So
I can get you on swimming if you want to be on swimming.
are you on swimming for random?
I can get you on swimming.
Oh.
It's like
I'll take it. I mean, the men's team didn't have a season, so that's easy.
that's true.
But anyway,
I'm just saying, if you feel left out, there are options for you.
there are.
So-
There are. I mean, I call any one of the sports. Put me on your list. But I think it's a great idea. I do. And I think that both programs could use some like direction. I will say that. And, navigating, and if I'm the head coach of either program, this is taking some stuff off my plate. I'm not upset about that. You know what I mean? As long as everybody's on the same page, I'm not upset about that. And so I think this is a good move all around.
It's interesting because he's going to have more duties because he's actually also going to be the sport administrator for men's basketball. So he's going to be the GM for both, and he's also going to be like the assistant AD that handles men's basketball. So he's going to have like a lot of
hats.
Yeah, he is. And I think that's the only question I have. And there's going to be a press conference Thursday morning. So, maybe we'll hear some of how he's going to manage all of this different stuff. I was actually thinking recently about the fact, like when you look at like the women's basketball program as an example, because we've obviously talked more about it this offseason. One, because even though they've had to add a lot of players from the transfer portal, they've added 4. Notre Dame men, not as many. So it was like in my head, like, I wonder if they would ever, go to a general manager. But then I was also wondering, well, if you hired one for women, you'd have to have one for men. This obviously covers both because now you've got a big umbrella. But, they are, it's like same sport, different game, basically. Like the approach to each is going to be different because you've got one and done on the men's side. You don't have one and done on the women's side. I think you still have to be 22, to declare for the draft, for WNBA. So
didn't realize that.
Like some differences there.
Well, you've got NIL differences.
Yeah.
And you got profile differences. Let's be honest.
Right.
The women's basketball program is at a different level amongst women's basketball than the men's program is amongst men's basketball. It's
exactly
two completely different profiles, two completely different NIL profiles. So, I mean, those are two completely different programs. Now, you want them to have similar philosophies and all of those kinds of things. But one, you're probably shopping with a caviar budget, and the other one, not so much, to be perfectly honest. Now, everything's relative, obviously. Things don't cost as much over here as they do over here. So you do have to have a higher budget. But those are all things that he's going to have to balance and also kind of be as equal as you can be between the two, but understanding that they are different.
That's going to be, because again, like he's the administrator for men's basketball. So there's obviously going to be some close proximity to what's going on there, but he's also, he's going to have to give time to both. So that's going to be a balancing act for sure. And, again, there'll be just enough differences. But I think that with the vision, the fact that he is a Notre Dame guy, obviously played here, having that experience, and also like the fact that he had been on staff over there, I think for at least a year, so he's been back on campus
at Notre Dame. He's been on staff for a year. Okay.
Right.
Okay. I didn't realize
in the administrative side. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So like he's
Cool.
He's been there. Yeah. So like he's got a feel for
Good.
kind of how things are operating.
That actually is a good thing. Like,
yeah.
I didn't realize that. Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's obviously a lot of really good things that I think can come of it. But I mean,
Sure.
the biggest thing is going to be, it sounds like, just his time allocation and how he divvies the time up running both sports. But I think that it's ultimately going to be great for both programs.
Yeah, agreed.
To have someone like this.
It's not going to be overnight, though. I really don't. I think he's going to have to do some balancing. He's going to have to figure out kind of the tightrope to walk. And I'm not saying, because in the past, previous to the current head coaches, the men's and women's programs were at odds a lot, it felt like. I don't believe that that's the case currently. There's more harmony there, but there's still going to be a tightrope that has to be walked, especially when he's kind of working for both programs.
Yeah, and I can actually tell you a fun little story.
I love stories.
We were getting back from a women's basketball trip, and this was maybe toward the end of the season. I think all those trips blur together at some point. But yeah, this year.
Okay.
So, the charter plane is getting in, and the staff, kind of sits up in front of me, like the coaching staff and all those kind of, so I can kind of see what's going on. And they've got like this paper and they're doing some different stuff. And so the men's basketball team was going to use the same plane, like within a couple of hours to, take off after we landed in South Bend to take off and go someplace else. And the women's coaching staff had made all these like little signs and taped them on the seats, like, go Micah, good luck guy, all that different kind of stuff, and left them in the plane for them. So
that tells you right there, there's harmony between those two programs. Obviously, like I said, they share practice facility, office space, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But can you at least, I'm not asking for stories, but you can at least attest to the fact that was not there in the past.
Yeah, there was. I don't think it was necessarily like to the Jim Calhoun, Gino Auriemma extent, like you heard some of those stories, but there was, there was some definite, again, because you're talking about one program had one level of success and the other, there was
jealousy.
There was some of that, like it happens from time to time.
Absolutely. It happens. Yeah. So,
but interesting that you brought that up as well, because Mike Bray himself tweeted, what a great move for Notre Dame men's and Notre Dame women's basketball with Pat Garrity. No one understands and believes in the place more.
Well, there you go. I mean, if you got Mike Bray's seal of approval, then it must be a great hire.
There you go.
What? Do you doubt my sincerity?
I wouldn't call it lack of cohesion. And there was.
I don't want to go down that road. I'm just saying there's more.
We don't need to
more harmony now.
Tales at it. Yeah. There was at least some level of, headbutting from time to time.
Right.
Yeah. And again,
big personalities.
It happens. Yeah. It happens at programs, where, UConn is the most extreme.
Sure.
Like Calhoun and Auriemma apparently hated each other for decades, basically, before Calhoun ultimately retired. And I wouldn't call it hate, here, but there was just, like some typical, stuff, and I think it definitely happens, especially where you've got a women's program that has a lot of success.
Right.
I think it happens at those kind of schools a lot more.
Well, and like I said, both of those head coaches have big personalities, and that when that happens, it's hard to have two alphas, kind of in the room at the same time. And there's a lot of sharing of facilities at Notre Dame, even more so back before they renovated the Loftus Center. I mean, they sharing that pit area. You know what I mean? Like, I can only imagine some issues that arisen,
back before they had that practice building. Yeah, because now they've each got their own gym, basically over. They've got
their offices are all in the same
building, but they've each got their own gym over there
because they had one. They had one practice facility, and it was one court in that practice facility, and they had to share it along with volleyball, by the way, at the time. Now everybody else is spread out now since then and all of those things. But at the time, I'm sure that got contentious at times.
Michael asks if anyone in college basketball likes Gino. The answer is yes. Gino likes Gino.
And everybody that ever played for
him. And ESPN likes Gino. Yeah, and his players like him. Outside of that, I don't know.
Again, that's also what happens when you win that much.
I did find it interesting, because like the Geno Muffet rivalry, was there for a long. It's fun to, like, I don't know if you knew this, but like back in the early 80s, they were on staff together, and they used to be, at St. Joseph's under Jim Foster. They used to be, at least pretty good friends back then. This was before both of them became head coaches, and obviously that changed over time. But I did find it really curious that after Geno didn't have Pat Summitt to butt heads with anymore, like it definitely felt like he redirected that, toward Notre Dame and McGraw. But I think a lot of that had to do as well with the fact that he was used to just going out and getting any recruit that he wanted.
That's true.
Across the country. And what happened? Muffet McGraw and Neil Ivey and, their staff were out there getting some major coups on the recruiting trail. And that turned Geno's ire right over here towards South Bend. But anyway, that's another story altogether. Okay, so we've talked about the future of the Notre Dame Southern Cal football series quite a bit over the last couple of weeks. And Pat Forty from Sports Illustrated has an article out about the schools negotiating this week to try to continue that long intersectional series, one of the greatest intersectional rivalry in college football. One of USC's suggested alterations to the series is playing it on the front end of the schedule, potentially with some neutral site locations sprinkled in among games, with each like home campus is still hosting some games, but some neutral, some games going to neutral sites anyway. So let's take these one at a time. Do you buy or sell first Notre Dame and USC moving the series to the front of the season, Fitz?
I buy it. I could care less where they when they play it on the schedule. It doesn't matter to me. I don't. It doesn't need to be. And frankly, I'm kind of sick and tired of it being in October in Notre Dame all the time, and at the end of the season every time they go to California. Let's mix it up a little bit, and if that means pushing it to the beginning of the season, cool. Like, I'm fine with that. I am not a traditionalist when it comes to where that game needs to be played as far as
long as they're
schedule, playing. As long as they're playing. I don't care. So if that's really a sticking point for USC that they don't play it at the end of the season or they don't play it in October, okay, take your butt whooping at the beginning of the year. That's fine. I'm cool with it.
I mean, I think it would actually be kind of cool. Like, you could just, kind of going back to those Notre Dame, Michigan at the front of the season. If they play them within the first couple weeks of the season, whether it's the very first week or the second week, that's obviously non-conference time, which makes it easier for USC.
For scheduling purposes.
And, look, we had RJ Abatia on last week, and we didn't get into this aspect of it, but something RJ had told me in the past is part of why the Notre Dame, the Notre Dame versus USC and Stanford worked out so well when they were both in the Pac-12 out there, is not just the October and November, October and Thanksgiving weekend deal, but also those two teams would play each other early in the season as a result of that, as a result of the fact that they were both playing Notre Dame. So they essentially had a partner that could fix that. Well, with them being in separate conferences now, USC doesn't have that anymore. So you can see that aspect of it. Maybe USC wanting to get that game out of the middle of the season in those October, November windows because of the fact that they don't have that partner now. But you and I have talked before about UCLA. Well, if you need a partner, just go get UCLA and just, do the same deal with them since they're in the Big Ten. But, the answer to this question is make the series happen. You've played 95 times in the last, almost
96 years.
Century. Yeah. Well, you missed the COVID year, and I think it was 3 years during World War II.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, you played almost 100 times, and like only World War II and a global pandemic have stopped the series. Like, let's not make it because you're being petty. Yeah. That's exactly right.
Yeah,
that's exactly
completely
right.
agree. I could care less where it lands on the schedule, and there's people that feel very similar, right? So Jankney S3 says it needs to be the last game every year, and Joe says it does wear on me that Notre Dame's on the road for the final game every year.
So one person wants it to be the last game of the year, the other doesn't want it to be at least on the road.
I will say, I would not have a problem with Notre Dame finishing the season at home every now and again. Like that would be like that never happens, or at least it hasn't happened in a really, really long time. Ever since they started having Stanford and USC at the end of the year.
One of the last times it happened, I think, was Boston College.
Boston
like
College.
Just a few years after that is when it, like this whole go to the West Coast thing started.
So I'm actually cool with a little bit of a schedule shakeup. Like that's especially if they're going to be dropping Stanford as an annual opponent. Let's mix it up now. Let's mix up the schedule a little bit. I'm actually very, very okay with that. Finishing at home.
Yeah, and
Thanksgiving weekend.
If anyone wants to insist that Notre Dame ends the season against USC, then you're probably going to see the series go away. So the question is, does it matter more to you that they end the season on that? Yep. I mean, that is traditionally rivalry weekend because like you've got Michigan and Ohio State, Alabama, Auburn, all those rivalry games are being played, most of them in that final week of the season. To me, it's just like this is, and 40 says this in his column, his article that he wrote, like this is one of the top rivalries in all of college football. And again, it's been going on for almost a century now. And RJ and I talked about this last week, why it's easily one of the top 5 rivalries in college football. And I mean, honestly, it might even be top 2 or 3. I mean, you've got Michigan, Ohio State is one of them. You've got Notre Dame and USC. I don't know, Miami, Florida State, that's traditionally been a pretty good one. But to get outside of that, I think Notre Dame USC easily fits in that top 3. Probably. I'm probably leaving. So Alabama, Auburn, that's another one, so maybe. But in any case, why would you want to see that go away? All this,
correct.
That we obviously know what conference realignment has done to college, not just college football, but college athletics with, all these teams traversing the country to play conference games. You're going coast to coast to play conference games if you're in the ACC or the Big Ten or wherever you happen to be. That's another good one, Adam. Texas, Oklahoma is another good one. But I still feel pretty good. Top 5 rivalry, wherever you want to slide it in there. But we don't need to see more rivalries leaving college athletics.
Agreed.
USC and Notre Dame need to figure out a way to get this done. Emphasis on USC, because obviously Notre Dame wants to keep this going. It's whether or not USC finds it a priority or not is where it's at this point.
Right.
So the other aspect of it, the neutral site aspect. Do you buy or sell Notre Dame USC periodically playing at neutral sites?
I'm okay with it. If that's what it takes to continue to play every single year, then I'm not going to plant my flag that it has to be at Notre Dame Stadium or it has to be in the S-hole that is the LA Coliseum. So if that's how they want to play it, like if you're going to move that game to, the NFL LA stadium, okay, I'm okay with that one. You know what I mean? If you're going to do a neutral site game in Kansas City or something, okay, cool. Like it doesn't matter to me. As long as they're playing, I don't care. I really, really don't care. You're going to move it to Soldier Field? Are you going to move, Notre Dame's home game to Indianapolis? That kind of thing. Are you going to be playing in NFL stadiums? Is that the plan? Okay. Vegas, like DK says. Well, okay.
Yeah.
As long as you're playing.
Vegas would be perfect. I think I mean, that's not that far from LA, obviously. Right. You'd be in a dome stadium. You don't have to worry about weather. That'd be awesome. I mean, even if you wanted to take it out of the Coliseum and play it at SoFi or wherever it happens to be. I mean, that would be, you could take it to freaking Phoenix or, Scottsdale or whatever. Like, you could take it all over the place. There's a lot of cool things you could do with Notre Dame USC playing in some NFL stadiums.
Do it. And I would be fine with that. I really, really would. I want this game to continue to be played. And if these are the stipulations that USC is coming to the table with, thinking that Notre Dame is going to be like, no, we're not going to do that. Well, I think they're wrong. And they're going to look like they've got even more egg on their face if they say, well, we want to do this and this. And Notre Dame's like, cool, let's do it. And if USC still says, no, we're good, then it's really going to be on them. And I'm okay for that too.
Joseph is writing it off. He says, let's be real. The Notre Dame USC rivalry game is gone. USC doesn't want it. It's a shame. I'm not willing to write it off yet.
No.
I think that there's still
if
a
that was the
chance.
case, they wouldn't be negotiating.
Yeah. If they're talking, there's a chance. We need to get Jeremy Gray and John Beckwith in here from, the two, Vince Vaughn and Owen Wilson from Wedding Crashers, and have them sit down, arbitrate this thing.
Yep.
Let's see what we can work out. Maybe throw a little Miles over here, go out, do some dancing, do some grinding, just go out, Notre Dame-USC, few margaritas, get it flowing and get a conversation going.
This can be figured out. And Jankney says maybe it's a Shamrock Series game. Cool. I'm fine with that. That's a Notre Dame home game, essentially. Cool. Let's take it all over the country. Let's
again, if you're doing it at the start of the season in one of those weeks, like one of the first couple of weeks, like you talk about starting the season with the bang, Notre Dame, USC, and wherever it happens to be.
Yeah.
There's so many places.
I think you can be very creative with this series as long as you're not married to a certain time of the schedule and you're not married to a certain location. Okay, cool. Let's do it. So I'm all for it.
Yeah, but then the question does become, how do you fill that back part? Who are you going to put Thanksgiving weekend? Are you going to get to play at home and those kind of things? Like it might be just as simple as Clemson fills that hole, and if they're going to keep Stanford on the schedule, then you're just basically alternating. 1 year you're in South Carolina, I guess, and 1 year you're in Northern California. If it came to that, but. I wonder how much the priority shifts away from, like that priority that Notre Dame has had wanting to get into Southern California. Like, do they address that? Do they, with like either UCLA or, again, like Shamrock Series type stuff potentially, where the Rams and Chargers play there at SoFi. Tommy says, can we just get to a super conference already so the 65 or so teams can go back to more regional/local scheduling? We can call them divisions or pods within the mega conference. I mean, that would solve a lot of things, honestly.
Maybe that's where we're headed. And frankly, I'm fine with football breaking off and doing their own thing and every other sport going back to kind of their original conferences for basketball and baseball and track and all that other stuff. That
football is one thing. Everybody else.
I mean, just call it what it is.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Just call it what it is. Let's just do it and call it a day. Like, I would honestly be fine with that as opposed to just kind of inching along, where we are.
Yep.
I do find that you can pull that one back up if you want. I mean, Joseph says John McKay and Era are rolling over in their respective graves. Interesting that you picked those two, first of all, since this series has been going on for 100 years. But my response to that, and I put it in
the
chat.
They did win, I believe, is 40 referenced. I think it was like 6 national championships between them in a span of 13 years that
Fair enough.
had in that article. So I don't know if maybe that's why he.
Well, my response would be any coach from that era or any of the eras looking at football the way it is right now and the conferences and all of these different things, they would all roll over in their graves seeing what college football has become. I mean, let's be honest. So I think we're doing them a service by trying to keep this rivalry afloat. You're doing them a service in that regard. Who cares where it's played?
Yeah. That was peak Notre Dame-USC.
Oh, for sure.
In that 70s range.
For sure.
When Era and McKay were there. Yeah.
For sure. That was OJ. It was when the juice was loose, wasn't it?
He was 60s. Still,
60s.
But,
all right, fair enough.
You had to bring up OJ.
Hey, he's a good football player. That's all I'm talking about.
True.
Good football player.
True.
And he's a heck of an ad man.
That he was. Jump over that Hertz rental counter.
That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying.
There is an On3 video show right now, Vince, asking if the expansion of the college football playoff to 16 teams would force Notre Dame to join a conference. Someone asked them, if non-conference games stop mattering, what happens to the team that only schedules non-conference games? Of course, being Notre Dame. Is this the straw that breaks the camel's back to make Notre Dame join a conference? Here we go again, Vince. What do you think?
Well, first of all, the answer is no, it's not. And we've talked about this 1,000 times. The only way Notre Dame is joining a conference is if somehow they are locked out of winning a national championship. Pretty
No
sure they
path to
proved
the
last
playoff.
year
Yeah.
that they can win a national championship. Like they have the ability to do that. They have the opportunity to do that. The 16-team playoff doesn't change that in any way. And in fact, it makes it more of a path to the national championship, in my personal opinion, for Notre Dame. So, no, this is not going to force them to do anything at all.
Well, and again, like what this person who's writing in is saying is nobody's going to schedule Notre Dame anymore because there's less incentive to schedule them. In other news, reason number 1,999,000 Notre Dame will be forced to join a conference. This just in, the rise of Caitlin Clark will force Notre Dame to join a conference. It's like, take your pick. Everything that anyone on the outside finds, they think it's going to force Notre Dame to join a conference. And this is just the latest. I mean, look, Clemson, that is it. Vince is rubbing his fingers together. It's
Johnny Manziel, baby. Like, it's all about the money.
Clemson just agreed to a 12-year series with Notre Dame. They know there's the possibility of a 16-team format. That obviously didn't deter them. And you know what? Given the opportunity, a million other schools, apparently with the exception of USC, would do the exact same thing. They would sign up to play Notre Dame on a 12-year contract if they could. You know why? It gets them, guarantees them national TV every time they play that game, home or away. And, look, it's not just Clemson. Obviously, that's the longest one with 12 years. Alabama, Florida, Texas, Michigan. They're all among the schools that are on upcoming schedules. I mean, we went over the whole thing last week when this Clemson thing was announced. And so, I mean, again, this is something I talked with RJ about last week and something that we've talked about as well. It's the opposite effect by going to 16 because more teams are going to be in the playoff, which means that there is more incentive to schedule marquee games, which the TV networks want, by the way. And let's be honest,
that's where the money comes from.
TV is driving everything. That's where the money is coming from. That gives them more incentive to schedule good non-conference games, whether it's Notre Dame or anybody else. I mean, the SEC and the Big Ten have the scheduling agreement that's going to be coming up soon. So it's the complete opposite, but again, like anytime anyone gets the opportunity to say this is going to force Notre Dame to join a conference,
it's hilarious.
They jump on it. There's more access to the playoff right now. Going to 16 is going to do nothing but help Notre Dame and give other teams more incentive to continue to play Notre Dame as a result, because you're not going to, because again, if it goes all the way to 16, look at everybody's record going into the playoff last year. Teams in that range, there are going to be some 3-loss teams that easily get into the playoff, like at-large bids probably into the playoff. So you can easily absorb 2 losses, if not 3, depending on who you beat and who you lost to.
Your fourth place SEC and or Big Ten team could have 3 losses.
Right.
And they're guaranteed a spot in.
Yeah.
So, that's going to happen at one point or another. It may not happen in 26 or 20. That's going to happen. There is going to be multiple 3-loss teams that get in because they got an automatic bid. That's what's going to happen.
And this is also going back to the USC stuff. This is also why it makes no sense. Again, like maybe USC at this point, I have no idea what's going on behind closed doors, but maybe USC at this point is sort of waiting to find out, are we going to go to 16? Because if it does go to 16, I think that's more incentive for USC to keep Notre Dame on the schedule. If it's, it's going to expand. It's either going to go to 14 or 16, and it's looking like it's going to go to 16. So maybe they need to be sure that it's going to go to 16 before they agree to this. But again, they're talking about, and I've seen their fans say this, well, we play a tougher schedule now that we're in the Big Ten. And it's like, look at USC's schedule this year, which we have, and look at Notre Dame's. Their schedule is no tougher than what Notre Dame's is.
Correct.
Like they play Michigan, which we've talked about. They play Oregon. They don't play Penn State. They'll have Illinois, which could be this year's Indiana, depending on how things go. The way it's going at this point, I feel like there's a lot of hype on Illinois. Maybe that ends up working against them. But My point is, in any given year, your Big Ten schedule, you're going to have a couple teams with some teeth, a few teams that are going to be there in the middle, and a bunch of softies.
Correct.
And look at what USC is already doing with its non-conference schedule at the front with Georgia Southern on there. Yeah,
it's embarrassing.
Yeah, so don't tell me that you're playing this infinitely tough schedule when you've got all these FCS teams on there at the front as it is. So speaking of the playoff, they are nearing consensus to change the seeding process next season and eliminate first-round byes for the conference champions. ACC Commissioner Jim Phillips recently said that he is in favor of going to straight seeding rather than the somewhat convoluted formula that they used last year by giving the top 4 ranked conference champions the 4 byes. It would also mean that Notre Dame would be eligible for a first-round bye. The proposal does require unanimous approval from the 10 FBS conferences and Notre Dame to be enacted for the upcoming 2025 season. This would be the only season it would be in effect because it's the last season of the 12-team format, basically. Scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you, Vince, that this will actually happen?
It's obviously not changing the number of teams that they're going to have in the playoff, at least for this year, right? And we talked about the fact that it has to be a unanimous vote with everybody that's a voter. Everybody has to be on board with this. I mean, this got fast-tracked because all of the bye teams got beat last year.
Right.
That's why this got fast-tracked. It's like nobody wants to buy anymore.
Now. Yep.
Nobody wants to buy anymore, which I think is hilarious, by the way. I think this has a good chance of passing. I'm going to give it like a 7.5. Like this is a situation that I did not think was going to be possible. I didn't think there was any changes for the longest time, but then all 4 conference champions lost, and it's like, we got to change this. Like, because everybody wants to react. They're not gonna, be ready for something. They're gonna react to something, and they're gonna react to the fact that all 4 lost. I think this has a decent chance of passing. I really do.
I do too. I put it at around an 8, I think, because, again, like it does require unanimous approval, which means the 10 FBS conferences, again, and Notre Dame. So you need 11 yes votes to do it. And, previously, my question was, would, the group of 6 now, basically, like, would they all go for it? What's the incentive for them? Obviously, there is no incentive because Boise State, look where they were last year. You have a chance to get that bye. Well, if it's only going to happen for 1 year, why would, if you're one of those in the group of 6, why would you go against what the big boys want? Since obviously they know who's driving the ship on this whole thing, and they're basically just kind of, clinging for dear life. So why tick everybody off by voting against it when you've got, however many years in the future where you've got to be part of this alliance to keep yourself in this thing? So I think there's a pretty good chance that they'll ultimately do it. Now, again,
and there's going to be politicking.
This is for 1 year. It's for this upcoming season only. And this season will still be at 12 teams, but they are voting on whether or not essentially to do away with the top 4 conference champions getting those 4 byes in the first round, and instead just go straight off what the rankings say, what the playoff committee ranks them 1 through 12. That's the seeding. Top 4 teams get the bye, and you go from there. So the bracket would look a lot different compared to this year if you did it that way.
I think the Power 4 conferences will be all in because they're going to see a scenario where they could potentially have more than one team in the top 4 to get a bye. You know what I mean? So you could have 2 SEC teams get a bye. You could have 2 ACC teams get a bye, whatever the case may be. Like, they're looking at a chance to have multiple teams from the same conference get a bye. So I could definitely see them voting yes. So that's 4. I see Notre Dame voting yes, because why would they not vote yes? It's an opportunity for them to get a bye.
Now they can get the bye.
Again, I still like having a home
whether
game,
or not you want it. Yeah.
But they still have an opportunity to get it. And they're not going to be penalized if they're in the top 4, which I like, right? it's really the group of 6. That's the biggest question mark, is the group of 6. What is that going to look like? What is their thought process on this whole thing? Because the reality is the group of 6 is not going to be in the top 4 to begin with.
Yeah.
And they also were not going to get a bye because they're not considered a Power 4 conference. So are they just going to say yes because the Power 4 teams want them to? Because it doesn't benefit them and it doesn't hurt them. You know what I mean? So, like, how are they going to vote? Is there going to be some holdouts? Is there going to be – I don't know. I'm curious to see what those 6 do, because they really don't have any skin in the game, honestly.
Right.
Unless I'm seeing this differently, I don't think the group of 6 teams have any skin in the game. I don't think they care.
Yeah, I mean, if it was going to stay a 12-team format going forward, then I think there would be a greater chance, probably no chance, that the group of 6 conferences would go for this. Because if it was going to stay at 12, that would give them an opportunity, if they've got one of the highest ranked conference, if their conference champion ends up being one of
that's a good point.
In the top 4, then you would want to keep it. But the fact that they're going to expand this and those top 4 buys, like the whole, whatever the system is, it's not going to look like what it looked like last year. So there would be, like, in that case, if they were keeping the 12, there would be incentive for them to keep it what it was last year. But with the expansion and the fact that it's only going to stick around for one more year, again, like, why rock the boat and just tick off the Big Ten and the SEC if that's what the Big Ten and the SEC want? Ultimately, you just find yourself on the outside looking in on everything going forward.
Exactly. But you do have to play some politics here. You gotta play the room a little bit.
Yep.
Like, hey, I'll vote for this if, kind of a situation.
Christopher, by the way, Traveler just hit the transfer portal. That's a pretty good one. Chief Brody says he is optimistic. He thinks the Notre Dame-USC series continues, but maybe will they'll open the season every year. I still think Pete needs to get another yearly rival, though, Michigan or Michigan State yearly. I wouldn't want it to be Michigan State.
Not annually. I don't want anybody else annually.
Yeah.
We've talked about this. I want like a pack of teams.
Pretty consistent revolving.
Rotating. Yeah.
Whether that means, we've talked about the idea of Michigan and Ohio State rotating. We've talked about the idea of rotating UCLA on the schedule, to stay out there in Los Angeles and that kind of thing. I wouldn't want Michigan State, though. I'm just like, sorry. Like, I know your father-in-law's and he Chuck watches from time to time. That's always a series, that in Purdue and Boston College, for that matter. I felt like those 3, when Notre Dame was playing those 3 schools pretty regularly, yeah, they were rivalries and, trophy games and all that kind of stuff, but I always felt like those meant more to the other schools than what they meant to Notre Dame, because of the fact that you had USC and Michigan on the schedule pretty regularly at that point as well.
Yeah,
those were the 2 biggest rivalry games. Rest in peace, Notre Dame alum. I forgot that George Wendt was a Notre Dame.
I didn't know he went to Notre Dame. I had no idea.
Passed away today. Cheers last episode 32 years ago today. Man, now you make me feel old, because I remember being in college watching that with my buddies. Man. Norm.
Everybody knows Norm.
Did you ever watch Cheers?
Yeah, not while it was live. Because it went it was 11 seasons. It was like 82 to 93 or something like that. Because I did look it up today when I saw that come across. So that means I was like 1 to 12. So a lot of the Cheers humor was a little over my head at the time, but I have watched many in reruns and whatnot. So I'm very familiar with Cheers. Very familiar with Cheers.
Corey says he misses the Notre Dame Michigan game.
I don't.
Corey, I agree with you. Vince does not. Yes.
No, don't miss it at all. Don't miss it at all.
Michael says, so annual non-conference games are basically gone with Big Ten teams. Well, yeah, I would say annual are. I mean, because just look at it now. And and that's not even Notre Dame's fault. I mean, when the Big Ten expanded, when was that? A few years back. I mean, that's when the Purdue and Michigan rivalries all went away. It was more about them than it was Notre Dame because they had an extra conference game, and now they've got even more conference games, I believe. So
and you'll never get those annual ones back, and that's okay. I don't. It doesn't need to be annual. Like I said, get them on a rotation. Play those. I want to play them. I want to play Michigan. I want to play Purdue. I want to play Michigan State. I would even succumb to Indiana every now and again, but I don't want them annually.
Right.
I want them on a rotation.
I mean, just like right now, Purdue's rotating on the schedule. Michigan State's going to rotate on for a couple of years. Michigan's going to rotate on for a couple of years. I would like to see Michigan more regularly than just just like twice in a 12-year period or whatever it ends up being. But it is what it is. Vince will never agree with that. The NFL is going to vote on a new straight seeding playoff proposal this week as well. It would de-emphasize winning your division and incentivize winning for teams to host playoff games. So if you're a wild card team with a better record than a divisional winner, you would get to host a playoff game instead of the division winner. Vince, buy or sell it?
I'm actually going to buy it. I know you play more games against your division and things like that. Like, I totally understand that. I totally get that. The NFL it is a league of parity, right? So, any given Sunday, all those cliches, I'm okay. 'Cause I think in this league in particular, I think records are about as comparable as they can be. And so I'm actually okay with it. I really am. If you're able to win 14 games in the NFL, you're able to win 14 games in the NFL. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like you're coming from one area that you're playing all kinds of patsies and another, I'm okay with it. I'm okay with it.
I am as well. John could have guaranteed that John would say he's against it, and he is.
Says winning your division matters.
See, I just and it would matter because you would still be in the playoffs.
Correct.
Even if you win a bad division with a sub 500 record, you're still going to be in the playoffs. So to that extent, winning your division would matter. I don't think I love this idea. I guess I should answer that before I get into it. So I buy it. Look at the Vikings last year. They won 14 games, but they were the wild card because the Lions won 15 games in the regular season. The Rams won 4 fewer games. They won 10 games, but the Rams got to host because they won a mediocre division. And I don't think you should be rewarded with a home playoff game for winning a mediocre to, in some cases below average division. So I'm all for this. I think that winning should matter. And like you said, in the NFL, because you've only got 32 teams and the way they set up the schedule, you're playing like the teams in your division are also playing the same teams from other divisions as well as within your division. So the schedules are a lot more similar in the NFL than they are in college football because you've obviously got so many more college football teams. So I think that winning should be incentivized, and that's what this would do. So I like it.
I do too.
Curious to see if they actually go for it or not. Because I think that, again, when we talk about the dollar signs, owners obviously are not going to want to have the chance of giving up a home playoff game.
No way.
If it comes to that. But you're also kind of saying, well, we're going to be a bad division winner, if that's what it comes down to.
Right.
So NFL owners did vote today to approve a resolution to allow NFL players to participate in flag football in the 2028 Olympics in Los Angeles. There would be a limit of 1 player per NFL team on each national team participating. So in other words, the Bears could have 1 player on Team USA, 1 player on Team Canada, 1 player on Team Mexico, et cetera, et cetera. Buy or sell NFL players playing football in the Olympics, Vince?
It's a huge buy. I mean, hockey lets their players play. Baseball lets their players play. Football should let their players play. And it's not even as much of a risk as the hockey owners are taking. It's flag football. Now, I'm not saying you can't get injured in flag football.
You can still blow out an ACL or an Achilles playing.
Not a quarterback. Football. Like, that's the moneymaker. The quarterback just stands there. It's 7-on-7. Like,
would you want your quarterback to play?
I would have no problem with that. They don't do anything. They just stand there and throw the ball. Like, I'm good with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm all for it. I do think the whole, like, one player per country per team, it's a weird rule. I'm not going to lie. It's a weird rule because most of those players are going to be Team USA, and it's going to force the whole, like, I'm going to look into my lineage, and I'm like 1/16th Mexican, right. So I'm going to go play for Team Mexico or whatever nationality, Team Italy, whatever. And they're Americans. Like, I don't know. That maybe they're just trying to strengthen those other teams, I guess.
Well, yeah. I mean, that would, because it happens, like Mike Piazza played for Team Italy.
Correct.
Back to that, like
right. Like I would play for Team Italy.
Yeah.
Because I would never make Team USA. So I'll go play for Team Italy. You know what I mean? Like,
right. Yeah. I mean, that is interesting, but
it's an interesting rule.
You would also have a lot more participation in other countries. Yeah. Like, it could guarantee these other countries would have an NFL player. Originally, I was not for it because of the risk of injury, because again, there is still some risk of injury by running around out there. But then I thought about it. And as you said, all these other sports, basketball, men's and women's basketball, hockey, baseball, they're all doing it. They're allowing their players to go out there and play it. And flag football is non-contact as opposed to, like hockey or even basketball. So you get to represent your country. Like no football player grew up thinking he was ever going to get to be an Olympian, most likely, or at least not playing football in the Olympics. And obviously the NFL is pushing this because they want to be global. How do you do it? You get football in the Olympics. That's what they're going to get.
Right.
And you need to have the biggest stars of the game out there playing it, just like Team USA and men's basketball and, the hockey Olympians and all that kind of stuff. You need the big names out there.
Right. And this was the only way to have football in the Olympics. Joshua's in the chat and he thinks it's normalizing, getting rid of contact sports and all this. Look, football is an American sport. You wouldn't be able to have it in the Olympics if you made it full 11-on-11 contact football because the United States would absolutely dominate. And that's not what you're looking for in the Olympics. You have to even out the playing field a little bit, So that's why they're doing the flag football thing. Well, come on.
Yeah, I mean, and I would push back on the normalizing the push to take all contact out of sports because, again, this started as a grassroots effort by the NFL several years ago, and the popularity of flag football has grown. But the way the NFL looks at this, by wanting to be more global, obviously basketball and like basketball specifically is played all over the world. Correct. Baseball is played, at least in other parts of the world, not as much in Europe, but football, not as much. And the way the NFL sees this, the way you get interest is by giving people in these other countries who didn't grow up playing football the easiest path to being able to play football. And the way to do that is say, well, there's not contact. You don't have to go out there and bash heads and beat each other up to play this sport. You can play it by playing flag football. And the way they're looking at it, look at all the international games that they're going to have. Brazil again. You're going to have Australia next year. You're going to have Ireland and England and Germany, Madrid, Spain. The way they look at it is you get people playing your sport, and that just gets them more interested in the sport that's at the top of the food chain, and that's the NFL. And you don't need much equipment to do it. You literally, the only thing you have to invest in is a football and the flags that you strap around your waist. So it's very inexpensive, and it's a lot, less risk of injury by doing it, and you give people around the world the chance to play your sport. That's why the NFL has pushed this whole thing.
Look, girls flag football is now an IHSAA sanctioned sport in Indiana.
Yeah.
It's starting up in the fall.
And again, the way the NFL looks at it, that's
progress.
That's another segment of the population.
Correct.
There's already obviously a lot of women, who are interested in football, but it's just another segment of the population that you're giving a chance to get that much more interest in football.
Yeah. I mean, it was just a big deal. All these schools in the area are hiring all these football coaches to coach the girls' flag football team. You know what I mean? And it's gonna be a conference champion and the whole deal. So yeah, I mean, it is being more normalized on the girls' side, but on the men's side, this is the way you have to do it if you're going to have it in the Olympics.
Right.
Just bottom line.
You don't have to be 300 pounds to go out and play flag
Correct.
football.
Right.
Like, you don't have to, and I think it's actually going to be 5-on-5 even,
Is that what it is? I haven't even looked at the rules.
That's what I saw.
Okay.
Because they were talking about it on both ESPN and NFL Network today. So Joseph says he misses the Michigan game at the beginning of the season. Me too, Joseph. Suck it to Dario.
Hey, that's fine. I'm good with it. Well, look, I'm okay with them playing. I just don't want it every year. That's all.
I agree.
Play it.
I agree with
it every year. I just look. I can't stand Michigan fans every single year. I don't want to hear it. Yeah, that's all. Play it. It doesn't.
A rolling home and home series.
Yep.
2 years on, 2 years off. Fill somebody else on the schedule in the meantime. That way, every 4 years. Like you come to Notre Dame, you go to Michigan,
right?
You get to play each other, in each other's stadium at least once in your career.
I'm fine with that. I'm totally fine with that. Mark says some of the drama that I deal with in my day job, I can send them over to flag football. You're not far off, Mark. You are not far off, my friend.
Joe says, so you're saying there's a chance for me in the Olympics? Hey, there's always a dream, baby. And this is actually the downside to it too, because I remember. Maybe it was a year or so ago. There's like one of these guys who's like a flag. He's like I don't know how old he is. I think he's probably in his 30s, but he's like this flag football legend, and like he's basically mad that, like he's been playing football and dedicated his life to flag football.
Now he's going to get replaced
now
by
some
NFL
guy is basically going to, get to play in the Olympics instead of him. And I can understand that.
I get that.
Yeah.
He needs to dial up his nationalities and find
there you go.
Find one and go be that guy.
Go play for Ireland. Yeah.
We're all mutts these days. You know what I mean? Like we've all got multiple nationalities in or I'll speak for myself. Like there's so many nationalities mixed in. My kids, I think that I like the highest percentage of anything that my kids are is like 12.5%.
Interesting.
That's the most.
Have you ever done one of those, what do they call it? Like an ancestry.com
I never have,
kind of stuff?
I'm curious to see what it would say, but I never have done that.
I haven't either. Chief Brody, he said, I got a brain buster for you. Buy, sell, hold. Notre Dame and Michigan meet 3+ times between now and their next scheduled meeting in 2020-33.
So that's 9 seasons, 3 times.
So in other words, will they be added before that series comes up?
I think he's just saying, do we want it?
Oh, I would buy it. Will it actually happen? I'm going to sell it.
I'm going to hold it, saying I would be fine with 3 times over the 9 years. That's 1/3. Okay, let's roll. That's once every 3 years or, twice every 6 years. Okay, I'm cool with that. That's enough.
Carlos apparently has something to hide. He says, don't do the ancestry.com. You'll be in their system.
Yeah.
Telling on yourself there, Carlos. I see your laughing emoji. But
oh, man. No, they're not going to add
That's hysterical, though. Like the amount of people who have done that and then end up going to jail for some stupid thing.
Because they use like familial DNA too. So it's like
you don't even have to be the one who submitted to it. Yeah.
If you got a relative who submitted, you're done. That's over, brother. Like, I'm sorry. Go find you.
Yeah. Pat says, gotta think teams are lining up to replace USC, don't you think?
I would absolutely think yes, but I would still want USC over any of those teams.
Yes, because they're the rival. It's the one that matters. They need to figure it out. And I mean, quite honestly, if the bulk of this is being driven by a head coach who's a little bit over 500 in 3 years there, then I would be thinking about a different head coach. Mm-hmm. Like I wouldn't just scrap history and scrap all tradition in a series that means what it means to both schools. And again, I think college football at large, I would be thinking about long and hard about the guy who's running my program if he wants to run just because he can barely go 500 in the Big Ten, and so he wants to scrap a good non-conference opponent.
He's got a history of it. He ran from Oklahoma because they were going to the SEC, thinking he was going to get an easier path to the playoff, being in the Pac-12, and oops, Pac-12 no longer exists, and now you got it. Well, and the way that it did, and now you get to deal with the Big Ten. So he has a history of running.
Yep.
Yeah, you're right. His buyout is too expensive for right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think the AD does have something to do with it, Brody, but I'm sure that there's also been a lot of conversations between
absolutely
the AD and
look,
Riley as well.
An AD's job is to do right by their programs. So they're going to talk to the head coaches and they're going to ask them what they want to do. Now, they may end up going a different direction, but good ADs are going to seek the opinions of their head coaches. They've had these conversations, and I'm sure Riley has said, no, can it? We don't want it.
I just don't understand how it could be good for USC's bottom line.
Correct.
When everybody is chasing a buck, how is it best for USC's bottom line to basically give away your best home ticket every 2 years?
Right. Agreed. And that's why teams are going to line up to take their spot if that does happen.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, that's what I would want.
Exactly. Well, we're not pre-recorded, Tommy, so I can't do an Irish goodbye, I guess, today. So
just end it. Gone.
That's right. It'd be hilarious if we were just in mid-sentence and I hit stop. All right. Appreciate you being here. As always, hit that like button. And I guess we'll just talk to you tomorrow on IB Nation Sports Talk.